Hey, Patrick J. Hilaire here. Hope you guys are doing well. So Financial Literacy Month is coming near its end. And this whole month will offer you guys all this free value, offering you guys content around financial literacy, just because I think it's important that more of us understand how finances work so we can better handle our money, make better financial decisions essentially, and not ruin ourselves financially because we were essentially ignorant of how the rules of money work. Obviously, money is not the most important thing. However, because we live in a capitalist society, I find that it is fairly important and it is part of our reality, whether we like it or not. Anyway, while making all this content this month, it got me thinking, if I were to teach a class or a course on financial literacy, what would my curriculum look like? What would my lessons look like? And with the help of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or Robert Kiyosaki, in this video, I'll be explaining 15 lessons that you should learn if you want to become financially literate. So take a look. So the first lesson, if I were to have a financial literacy curriculum, would be lesson number one is the history of money. If we want to understand capitalism, if we want to understand finances, if we want to make sure we understand how finances work, how to become financially literate, we should probably start around the history of money. Basically, we didn't always live in a capitalist society. I mean, I have because I was born into it. However, we as a human civilization didn't always live in a capitalist society. So we should probably know certain dates and events that greatly impacted how our capitalist system works today. So you should probably know when and why the Federal Reserve was formed, maybe what happened in 1971 that made President Nixon take the dollar, the US dollar, off of the gold standard, and some other dates that are revolving around the history of capitalism and money. Next lesson, or lesson number two, is you need to understand your financial statement. So in regular formal education, you would get a report card or a progress report basically telling you you're at this level when it comes to your progress in whatever course you are. Now, if you're in a financial literacy course, what we'd be looking at is your financial statement. And you should understand how to read this. The basics of it is three parts. First is your profit and loss statement, basically talking about how much you made, how much you lost if you're running a small business. Next is your balance sheet, so you should know what's coming in, what's coming out. And finally, your cash flow statement. So again, this is understanding if you have an asset that produces income, that is it cash flowing or are you losing money every month, and is it coming out of your pocket every month? So again, those three things are your profit loss statement, your balance sheet, and your cash flow statement. You should try to understand those things or at least have a general idea of how that works. Next lesson, or lesson number three, is you need to understand what the difference between an asset and a liability is. And this is what tends to happen to a lot of people, is we get those things confused. So an example is that most people think a house is an asset when in fact it's usually a liability. A general definition of assets and liabilities is that an asset is anything that puts money into your pocket. Now, a liability is anything that takes money out of your pocket. So if you just have a house and you're not renting it out, every month you're paying a mortgage, every month you're paying property tax, every month you're paying all these expenses, that's a liability. You're losing money every month. However, if you have a house that you rent out, or you rent out a couple of rooms and each month money goes into your pocket, now it's considered an asset. So you should understand the differences between assets and liabilities in general if you intend to become financially literate. Next lesson, lesson number four, is knowing the difference between cash flow and capital gains. So again, in general, cash flow is basically you have an asset and every month it is putting money into your pocket. It's cash flowing. Capital gains is, let's say I buy an asset like a home for $100,000, wait a couple of years, now it's worth $200,000. Capital gains is that difference, and that's how I would make a profit. If you intend to become more financially literate, usually from the people that I've met, the ones that are usually self-made millionaires, people that build businesses, people doing what they love regardless of how much money they make, they usually invest in cash flow and not necessarily capital gains. They usually treat the capital gains as icing on top, but they're trying to secure capital gains first so that they know the moment I close on this deal, I'm cash flowing, I'm getting money every month, and if it grows in value, then that's a bonus. Next lesson, lesson number 5, is knowing the difference between fundamental investing and technical investing. So fundamental investing, basically you're analyzing a company's financial performance and its financial statements. So usually this is where you understand, is the company actually cash flowing? Is the company making a profit each month, each quarter, each year? And then you're investing with a company that has strong fundamentals. That's fundamental investing. Technical investing, that's where you're looking at those technical indicators. Those are the people that are watching how a stock performs, and they're able to understand what these indicators mean. Let's say if a stock goes up and down, and then back up, maybe that's a signal. I'm not too knowledgeable about technical investing. I've focused mostly on fundamental investing because, again, for myself, I'm more focused on cash flow, not necessarily capital gains. Next, lesson number 6 in the endeavor to become more financially literate, a lesson they should learn is how to measure an asset strength. So there's many opportunities out there. In fact, we live in a time where, right here, I'm just using my phone. My phone literally has the capacity to pay me double, triple, 10 times what I would make at my regular job, and it's in the palm of our hands. There's opportunity absolutely everywhere. However, with financial education, we want to be able to measure which investments are worth pursuing. In other words, there's different ways we can analyze different investments, different assets, and how they would help us reach our goals. One of the ways you can do this is by looking at a couple things around an asset or around a business that we can analyze, and that's looking at the team, who's the leader, what's the company's mission, is this asset actually cash flowing, how do they communicate any systems that they have, how's their legal setup, and what is the actual product. Next, lesson number 7. This is something that even until now I'm still working on, just like many of the other lessons, but this 7th lesson is know how to choose good people. Basically, as an investor, as someone who's becoming more and more financially literate, you need to learn basically from every interaction. This is something that I've been working on recently because once you start going into deals with other people, once you start building a team, once you start working with others, which you will have to because investing and business is basically a team sport, you need to be able to choose your partners and members properly. You need to be able to choose people that either complement what you might lack in skills, but a deal can be ruined by a bad partnership. Basically, you want to make sure everyone's on the same page and be able to filter out who would be a good business and investment partner and who wouldn't be that great and probably who might ruin you. Next, lesson 8 is you need to know what asset class is best for you. So in general, there are 4 basic asset classes. First, you have business, then you have real estate, then you have paper assets, and then finally you have commodities. So in order to become financially literate, you may want to study all 4 of these, but at first you want to work towards becoming an expert at one. So with my personal story is when I started investing around the age of 19, I had already been studying dividends and dividend paying stocks since I was 17. And from 19 onward, I had only invested in dividend paying stocks, nothing else. I'd only studied dividend paying stocks, nothing else. I created my formulas, I created all my systems around dividend paying stocks because that's what I wanted to focus on at first. I didn't get into real estate until much later, which was basically last year. You want to become an expert at one and then eventually branch out to the others. So lesson number 9, again, connected to lesson 8 a little bit, is know when to focus and when to diversify. So ideally, you'll want to be diversified into 4 asset classes. So again, that's business, real estate, paper assets, and commodities. However, you want to focus on becoming an expert on each one of them one at a time, just like I mentioned in a previous video. Now that being said, you want to learn when you want to be focused on one and when you want to just start diversifying. So for example, now I've basically diversified myself into the 4 asset classes. However, right now I'm more focused on either building my business as an author or building my real estate business, or at least maintaining it. I'm not really focused too much on commodities. I do have a little bit of gold set around, but that's just there for protection just so that I have it, and paper assets, same as well. Still working on investing in dividend paying stocks. Now, lesson 10 is learn how to minimize risk. So with investing in business, there's always a risk involved. You need to learn different ways to minimize risk depending on where you're at and depending on which asset class you choose. So the 4 different asset classes all have their own risks, all have their own positives, but again, they come with their own cons as well. So you should have a general idea. Again, do your own research, start learning about what are the risks around each of the asset classes and how do I minimize those risks. So for example, one of the ways that I minimize my risk in real estate is that real estate, it means that once I get this property, I had to make sure that it cash flows or at least puts money into my pocket every month as soon as possible, because there is a risk that if I can't get tenants in at a certain time, then it starts eating away at my own money, my own cash flow, my own cash reserves. So I have to find systems to make sure I have a tenant in on day 1 of once I take possession of the property. Next, lesson 11 is you need to know how to minimize taxes. So this whole idea when financial literacy that it's not about how much you make, but it's how much you keep. And taxes is one of our biggest expenses in our capitalist societies. And a financially intelligent person will understand and know the certain rules so that they can take advantage of the tax code to make him or her a little bit more, not only financially literate, but they'll be able to keep more of their income, more of their profits to themselves and pay less of that in taxes legally. Again, I'd like to highlight this idea of legally because there are legal ways of using the tax code to your advantage so that you're keeping more of what you make and you're not just giving it away or burning it away somewhere else. So again, this whole idea is you want to learn to minimize your taxes and at least know a little bit about taxes so that you can take advantage of your city's and country's tax code. Next, lesson 12 is you need to know the difference between debt and credibility. So there's also this idea of good debt versus bad debt. So good debt is essentially I'll borrow money to invest in something, and that something, that asset, pays me every month or regularly, and I use those regular payments to not only pay back the debt that I borrowed, but also cash flow at the same time. Essentially, I'm using debt or other people's money to pay me passively, essentially. Now, bad debt is essentially just spending money using debt on things that I'm just buying that doesn't really return anything to me financially. Now, you need to learn how to use debt because then you can start leveraging money. And one of the key things about using debt is learning how to use it wisely and learning how to use it towards good debt and also being able to have a plan to pay it back. Next lesson, lesson number 13 is know how to use derivatives. So I can't even say the word properly. A derivative is something that is derived out of something else or another object. An example of this is orange juice is a derivative of oranges. So I use oranges, turn it into orange juice, and then I can make something off selling my orange juice, let's say. So my business in being an author is a business that derives from my mind. So I'm writing books, or I've already written books in my head, or I'm writing it down on my laptop, whatever it is, and I use those ideas to turn into a physical product, which is a book, which I can then pass on through sales to other people, to other customers. So that's how I would use a derivative. Again, you want to learn how to use different derivatives and how that would work in the 4 asset classes. Lesson number 14, we're almost getting to the end here. So now lesson 14 is know how your wealth is stolen. So there are 4 things that'll steal your wealth and basically eat at it slowly or quickly, depending on how financially literate you are. First one is taxes. Taxes is one of our biggest expenses. Next one is debt. So a lot of people will get into really bad debt situations where interest almost becomes impossible to pay and that you're basically getting your money stolen from you every time those interest payments come in. Next is inflation. So inflation is basically our dollar gets weaker and weaker every year because, well, many factors are linked to inflation. Again, do your research. I won't go too in depth with this one. Next is retirement. So retirement will also steal some of your money because, especially here in Canada, you're getting taxed twice on your retirement. And again, you can look into that in more detail. So again, you need to be able to understand these wealth stealing forces so that you can make sure you're making money rather than losing it. Now, the final lesson you need to learn if you want to become more financially literate is you need to learn how to make mistakes. It's nice and great that you want to get into business, you want to get into investing. However, if you do nothing and you just read about it, watch these videos, and think about it, then you don't really get the actual experience that's necessary in an activity. And business and investing are activities, meaning you need to be active, you need to be doing it. And the big key here is to learn lessons whenever you make mistakes and not let them take you out of the game completely. So there's many times where I've made a bunch of mistakes, especially in the beginning, where I basically lost money, but luckily I was using, at the time I was using a journal, so I would note everything every time I made a little mistake so that I can use it as a learning opportunity. A failure is not really a failure if you extract a lesson from it, and that's something that is very important when it comes to business and investing. So I hope you got some value out of those 15 lessons on how to become more financially literate. Hopefully, if I have a little bit of time today or tomorrow, on the last day of Financial Literacy Month, I'll be able to come out with a stack or just a couple short notes or little picture clips of each of these lessons so that you guys can get more value out of it. You guys can review it whenever you want. And maybe in the future, I'll make more detailed videos on this. But this is just to give you a little bit of the 15 lessons if you want to become financially literate that you should probably start looking into. Again, do your research. You need to be surrounding yourself around people that you can talk about these things, test out ideas, maybe actually go into a business with these people so you can learn and actually do the work that's necessary and not just think about it, like I mentioned in the last rule. So hope you guys got some value out of that. Patrick J. Hilario here. Hope you guys have a great day. And again, I'm very thankful for everyone that's been paying attention. Financial Literacy Month has been awesome. Have a good one.